So, welcome everyone. My name is Chad Jennings, and I'm a product manager for data and analytics at Google Cloud. And it is my distinct pleasure and honor to be joined by Ed Putigel, Executive Director of Data Products from the New York Times, and Rob Goretzky, VP of Data Engineering from Major League Baseball. We've got a really interesting session for you, so thank you for joining us. We're going to spend the next bit of time talking about how Ed and Rob have guided their organizations to innovate and deliver for users, customers, colleagues, and fans in this new normal that we're living in today. And so I have a little bit of creative license. I can define what new normal is for the context of this call. We're going to focus on two dimensions. The first dimension of new normal will be digital transformation, migration to cloud computing. And the second one will be something that we've all heard of and dealt with this year is COVID. So we're really talking about how digital transformation, data and analytics have evolved and how COVID has shaped implementations and reshifted priorities in 2020. So let's get right into it. Gentlemen, can you please introduce yourselves, introduce your company, and a key thing that your company organization is dealing with right now? Ed, let's start with you, please.
Sure. So like Chad said, my name's Ed Putigel. I run the data product org at the New York Times. We specifically focus a lot on collecting data about how our users behave on apps and our website and provide that data for analysts to do end-to-end analytics.
Gotcha. And Rob, please.
And hi, my name is Rob Goretzky. I'm the VP of Data Engineering for Major League Baseball. My team's primary responsibility is to aggregate, collect, store, and distribute our fan data so that we can better understand our fans and ultimately bring fans closer to the game of baseball.
All right, so we've got two groups that are doing very different things with their time, but using some of the same tools. So, like this dichotomy and commonality will evolve over the course of the conversation here. So let's start with use cases. And so, Ed, if you wouldn't mind, can you describe a little bit about the primary use cases that you use data and analytics for?
Sure. So we're primarily interested in understanding different types of segments of our users. So frequently we are interested in measuring our audience and understanding how they come on sites. So that way the newsroom can act appropriately and to make decisions about information that should be on our homepage or push notifications or that sort of thing. We also are actively thinking about behavioral analytics, as I said earlier, how people are engaged on the site and trying to understand different behavioral patterns, particularly as that's going to push toward people's decisions toward registration, subscription, and also churn.
Gotcha. And can you tell us just a little bit about how you and your group interact with the newsroom?
Yeah, so we consider the fact that we have an end-to-end kind of platform where on one side, we work very closely with our product teams and make sure that we're collecting the right level of data that they're interested in. And that could be things like, what articles people are reading, how long are they staying on site. But to the other side of it, the newsroom is, ultimately interested in audience. So we also build tools for them that help understand things like how are people coming on site, how does Google search or our different social promotions play a role in a person's decision to read the Times, and also just get a better sense of what they're doing on these pages.
Gotcha. And Rob, over to you for the next bit. Can you tell us a little bit about your primary use cases, please?
Sure. So our primary use cases involve understanding our fans' behavior. So basically, we look at all fans' interactions and transactions that occur digitally or in the ballparks as much as possible to be able to tailor the experiences that our fans have with our website, apps, and at the stadium themselves to their interests and to their preferences. So, at its core, my team was founded on some basic data sets that we still work with very heavily today, including our ticketing and shop sales data, so what fans are purchasing. We also get digital streaming data. So MLB TV, our product for streaming digital baseball live on the internet, which has been live since 2002, been streaming on the internet longer than Netflix has, is one of those things that for us we've always seen as a gold mine of information about what our fans are interested in. We can track, exactly and offer what fans are watching per game. We can see their length of watch per game. Are they jumping between games on a split screen view, or are they focused on a single team? So there's just a lot of information there that we have to start with in terms of just interaction with our usage data. And then that gets joined up with things that occur in person in ballpark. For example, our MLB ballpark app allows fans to check in when they scan their ticket. So we can have fans get targeted offers and promotions that are tailored to them at the ballpark. And that's an area that we're always looking to improve on as time goes on as well. So it's kind of a combination of those data sets. And the use cases then are, again, personalization, marketing, and basically, again, trying to just make sure we meet the fan where they are.
Gotcha. And so let's actually double click into each of those for you. So I am a customer of both of your services. Thank you very much. Can you tell me, like as a customer here, like what are the benefits that I get from Ed, your work, and from Rob, your work? Rob, why don't you go first this time?
Sure. I think for us, it's all about trying to make sure that you as a fan are treated as an individual. An example of that very recently this year is something that seems kind of obvious and almost table stakes, but something that I think we were looking to make sure we did right was offer you articles to the fans, to the teams that you're interested in, even if you're not coming to that team specific website. So if you're coming to MLB.com, the landing page for all of Major League Baseball, we still, if you've declared your preferences for a single team, we certainly want to tailor that to you and make sure that it resonates with you. So I think that's a good example. I mean, more specifically, when you get into our marketing initiatives as well, the goal there is always to try to tailor you an offer for tickets or a package that resonates with what your history has been. So for a casual fan, that may be a single game package. But for a fan that's been coming repeatedly, you're actually going to do better by buying a package and coming together like that.
Gotcha. Ed, same question, please.
Yeah. Well, funny thing about the way the web works, I feel like we work on a lot of the same things, Rob. So, ultimately, there's a lot of the similar experiences with the New York Times. A lot of our data does end up getting used to help create or curate preferences around personalization. So that way we're sending content to people that, maybe they wouldn't have normally read, but we want to expose them to. We also use it to make sure that we're not always showing the content that they've already read. So that way, you're not just constantly re-engaging with the same information over and over again. And likewise, a lot of this also gets used in our targeting systems, so we can make sure that we're, sending out the right messaging about, different subscription packages that we offer, because we want to make sure that our end users are interested in the product that they're actually interested in subscribing to.
Gotcha. I'll also tell you that a feature that I really appreciate in the New York Times app is you're done, right? You don't give people an endless scroll. Like, how do you decide when enough is enough? Because, to be honest, at the beginning of COVID, I could easily spend 3 hours scrolling through news, just trying to absorb and feel like an informed person. And it was bad for me. So I really like getting to the end and having it tell me, you're caught up. Go about your day.
Yeah, that actually had a really important role in our analytics side too, because that's something that we wanted to track. We needed to have a better sense of like how long people were really spending, how often they were actually completing content. But yeah, there's a pretty big role around, understanding what people are already reading and then making sure that we're only exposing them to newer content.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the service that you provide to all of us and to me in particular. So let's go back and talk about, kind of roll back the clock a little bit. Like both of your organizations have migrated from like other data infrastructure to Google Cloud. And so let's talk about your migration experience. And so Rob, would you kick us off here? Can you tell us a little bit about where you came from and where you've landed now?
And one thing about my role, having been at Major League Baseball now for 14 years, I've seen technology tides change a few times, and I guess this is one of the exciting things about being a technologist is that there's always something newer that ultimately reduces your maintenance burden and allows you to focus even more deeply on your business. And I think we've seen that trend over time. So 14 years ago, we started off, the only database we had in play at Major League Baseball at all was Oracle. So when everything looks like a nail, then you've got yourself a hammer and you get to work. So we started off building our data warehouse on Oracle, quickly saw limitations when we had larger data sets, especially around transactions and interactions, that, just running a group by query it would take several minutes. You'd hit errors on Oracle because it just wasn't built for that. It was built for transactions, not for aggregations and reporting. So we moved to a Teradata data warehouse platform that offered us a lot of those benefits of a massively parallel, database that was meant for transactions, for interactions, and for reporting first, and for transactions not really at all. So Teradata really helped us move forward. We were on Teradata for about 6 years, and again, we started seeing the limits of that platform when it came to being not as scalable as we like and still requiring a lot of maintenance burden overhead. So we started looking at our options, and we successfully migrated to BigQuery about a year ago.
And tell us a little bit about the about that experience. Like I observed that happen on the Google side. So like I was in on the conversations when we were onboarding you and all. But my memories of that are not so relevant here. But can you tell us, like, how long did the migration take, first of all?
So we completed a migration project on a pretty aggressive timeline. We finished it up, moving all of our data in about 7 months, all of our data and all of our data pipelines. The moving the data was really the easier part, copying sets of data, no matter how large they were, and essentially bringing them into another system was the relatively easier part. Trying to keep that in sync and basically keep two systems up and running in parallel was certainly trickier. And probably the most time consuming part was looking at every data pipeline that we had coming in and out of the system and figuring out how to rewire those to work properly on BigQuery.
And what about like code, like just regular analyst SQL queries?
So, I mean, again, we work very closely with our analysts to make sure that they were aware of this transition, and most of them embraced it wholeheartedly. I think what they found is, within BigQuery, a community where you could very easily Google search yourself an answer for something. And I can't understate enough how much that sort of happiness and ease of use, being able to search on Stack Overflow for an answer to something that wasn't entirely obvious is huge. And I think you don't get that as much with some of the closed garden systems that exist elsewhere. So our analysts embraced it. We told them, hey, you've got some time. What we did is we started copying data right away into BigQuery. So that if analysts were operating in a read-only mode, as usually they are, they could use either system, but we strongly encourage them to use BigQuery. Say, hey, listen, you've got 6 months on this, but you may as well start anything new, build it on the new system. It's going to be the exact same data. We've set up replication processes from the existing system, so the data is as fresh as it was in the production Teradata system, and go ahead and give it a shot. And I think as soon as most analysts tried that and they saw the speed that they were getting out of their queries and just the ease of use of the console, they didn't look back at all.
Interesting. And so like they were able to bring new workloads over, but one problem that a lot of customers I interact with have is like, hey, I've got 2,000 scripts that I need to port, and I don't want to transcode all of those. So how did you guys crack that nut?
So for that, we had help from a Google partner known as a CompilerWorks. They offer a tool that essentially breaks down SQL statements into their constituent parts and then is able to recompile them or transpile them into a different language. So as much as ANSI SQL is ANSI SQL at a high level, those little differences are what get you. And Teradata had some very specific syntax items, some of which we really liked, that just weren't the exact same in BigQuery. And so translating those was not as simple as a regex search and replace. We wish it was, but it wasn't. And so you ended up having, this tool that could come in there and rewrite the queries for you in a way that fit perfectly within BigQuery's model. And a great example of where that really excelled was that it even understood things about the data types of the fields within the SQL statement. So for example, other database systems such as Teradata were not as strict about if you were trying to put a string into a numeric column. They just would allow that. Whereas BigQuery is a little more strict about the types and says, hey, you have to put a cast statement around that. So the CompilerWorks tool was actually that smart. It saw that, hey, this is a string field, and I know that the data type that you're bringing in is an integer, so you're going to need a cast statement here, and it would write that for you. So we found, for the most part, the SQL that it produced almost always was accurate. Sometimes it wasn't the cleanest thing, as any machine-generated code will be, and in some cases we chose to punt that cleanup till later just to get through the project. But in general, we were able to run with something that was like any other transpiler would do, it runs on another different language platform at its core.
So, do you have any notion for like if you had 100 queries, how many of them got translated successfully, and how many of them needed human interaction?
I'd say for the most part, if we had 100 queries, most likely the tool would run through all 100 of them. It would spit out some warnings for a few of them about things that maybe it wasn't so sure about, but it never really hit a situation where it said, I just don't know what to do here. And we still, but that said, we didn't just accept that code as gospel. What we did on our side during our migration project was we actually built some tools ourselves just to do table by table comparisons, basically a table diff. And so what we would do is run our process with the same input data on the old system, take the output from that, and compare it with the output of the same process on the new system. And then we would basically do column by column, row by row diff to see this should match. And certain things maybe wouldn't match about timestamps, perhaps, that you loaded data, but every other field should match. The sums and counts should match. And so we sort of gave ourselves a lot more confidence that way. I think one thing that we found the tool or just any other tool couldn't do that well, and one thing that we bit off early on that maybe we shouldn't have as part of the project was also dealing with time zone issues, in that we acted very time zone naive in our previous databases, in the sense that we just kind of assumed we're a business in New York, everything is in Eastern time, right? And that's not the way the world works. And I think most systems over the last few years have evolved to using some variation of GMT time at their core. And BigQuery has some pretty strong fundamental concepts there that allow you to store timestamps and then request them at any time value. But again, those were the kinds of things that I think the transpiler could have never known about, because it sort of required some implicit business knowledge that this field is actually in Eastern time when we get it from a vendor.
Oh, thanks for that. Like the folks who are watching this that are interested in a migration are going to find that that last couple minutes really insightful. Ed, let me switch the focus over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about your migration experience and kind of the call it the difference in scale that you're able to get to now versus previously?
Sure. So when I came to the New York Times about 5.5 years ago, we were actually hitting a very interesting situation on our hands, where not just were we starting to get a little bit more complicated data that was a lot harder for analysts to crunch on a daily basis, but we were also starting to hit hangups with how that data was even streaming into that system, and how we had previously had set up that environment. And so we were in the middle of using Redshift as one tool. We were using an on-prem version of Hadoop at the same time, trying to balance these two out. And we had teams that were dedicated to really make sure that management was working. However, we had some really hard challenges where I came in and had to sit with about a dozen different analysts and have to help them understand Java errors, because that's every dream of what a SQL analyst wants to see, is understanding what a null pointer exception means, and get them to figure out a way where we could start crunching data in a better way, so we weren't running queries, going to grab coffee, hoping that the query was done by the time we came back, and then could move forward, or even making sure that the query was returning exactly what we wanted it to be. So we started talking with Google around that same time, when we started realizing that Hadoop was definitely not going to be the on-prem solution for us. And we started that conversation with BigQuery. The translation for that for analysts was night and day. We did end up going, as just like Rob also said, it was a pretty aggressive timeline for us to do the migration. We actually only ended up moving part of our systems over, which was more the analytics side and less the system overhead that I can gladly talk about later. But we wanted to focus on the analysts and really make sure that the analysts were getting a top of the line system that treated them the way that they would want to treat the data themselves. And from that, I remember my boss at the time, he ran his very first query and was ready to go grab his coffee. And then the query was already done by the time he got up from his chair. And he was just like, whoa. And our analysts talked about that for years, just how much of a game changer that was for getting them to do the analysis that they wanted to do. Yeah.
So So great. Like, performance at scale is one of the things that BigQuery tries or hangs its hat on. And so, I'm glad to have you relay the story. But that was really, to be honest, only half of that little nugget that I just said, right? That was the performance side. But tell us a little bit, if you can, about the difference in scale that you've seen, like not just over the last few years, which I know has been considerable, but even over, I don't know, like things that happened, earlier this month, and I'm referring to the election.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Chad, because while we were doing that BigQuery transition, we did have that other concern of our other systems just not scaling correctly. And I remember working with an engineering partner and him saying, this system's going to fail by this November date because there's just no way that we're going to be able to scale up to the audience that we expect on that date. And the team worked really, really hard to band-aid that, and we were able to at least be able to support it on that day. But then we came back and said, cool, we have 2 years to figure out how to fix that problem. So we started this, and it did take a 2-year expedition of moving our streaming pipeline over to Google Cloud. And that included using primarily App Engine, which has been a really great flexible environment for us to scale up and down as we need, and Dataflow and PubSub as just great ways to manage that data coming in. And then we have much less of a concern of losing that data. Now we're at a point where we are probably getting between 10 to 12x of the traffic that we had originally received on our first issue that we had. And no one is concerned. We just had a really successful week in November, I guess you could say, from a data perspective. Really proud to see that there was no data loss, which was our biggest fear. And we're not concerned at all anymore about trying to manage things like requests per second. It just happens and it's working.
So I just want to confirm. So what you said is you had a 10 to 12x increase in scale and nobody's concerned.
That's right.
See, so that is it, people. Like that is the point. The queries go fast, and you can scale up like that. And instead of like sleeping with your pager, for folks that remember what a pager is, right? Now it's like nobody's concerned.
To add, I joked with the newsroom a couple of years ago and mentioned, I was up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning one night trying to keep data running so that way they had a good sense of what was going on with our audience. And then I was still trying to backfill that in the morning, and this year I told them I ate a pint of ice cream and I chilled.
Yeah. Just to be clear for the people viewing, the story about like the 2 a.m. work, that was on the previous system.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Just want to clarify. All right. So gentlemen, thanks. That was excellent stories about like migrations and the benefits, like the speed and performance gains that you got over here, and the ice cream instead of the 2 o'clock in the morning. Like I'm going to make a bumper sticker about that. Let's pull back a little bit and talk about COVID, right? So obviously COVID's changed our lives. It's changed our priorities. We're all doing this from our home theaters instead of like an office building. So it's changed our lives as, workers, as individuals, as a society, as a human race. And so like bringing that in the context of this talk about data and analytics, how did COVID change what your teams were going to do in 2020? So Rob, let's start with you on this one. Can you tell us a little bit of the things that MLB did in response? Like a lot of us were paying attention to the baseball season, but how did that translate into actions for data and analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, the biggest change right off the bat was, unfortunately, having to look at some of our products and see our revenue stream change significantly. That our normal craziness around understanding fans at the stadium and ticket sales obviously was not going to be a thing for a little while. And so what we as a company did was try to focus on fan experiences. This included releases of new apps, including our new game Rally that was released this year, that allows fans to participate in basically predicting what they think the next play will be. And the idea is, you can't be at the stadium, but you can play this game from home and sort of feel like you have a little more stakes in what's happening in every single play. And again, from my team's perspective, our role in this was then ingesting data from that and then helping the business understand what was resonating with fans, what was making fans stick around for an app like this. And of course, in person and at the stadiums, the omnipresent cardboard cutouts were everywhere. And our teams, helped teams to deliver programs that allowed fans to reserve those, and even to go so far as how to retrieve those after the season was over. As part of our program of sharing data with the 30 MLB clubs, and one of the biggest benefits of moving to BigQuery in general was that it made data sharing very easy. We use a concept in BigQuery called authorized views in order to share data with our 30 MLB clubs. We have over 50 data sets that we share with each of our 30 clubs. And one of those data sets has to do with ticket scans, so entries. And normally in a regular season, that would be humming along with every one of the home games that goes on. That was not the case this year. But for one particular club, when they were looking to actually have fans come and safely retrieve their cardboard cutouts at the end of the season, they wanted to know when the fan had arrived and have as little interaction face to face as possible. So they actually leveraged the fact that we had real time data streaming in of the ticket scan entry into BigQuery. They were able to basically look on their side at our shared view, which is also a real time view of the exact same data that we have. And when that fan had arrived, they were notified and they could quickly bring that fan their cardboard cutout. So that's just an example. I mean, again, we wish it was all about ticket scans and entries and hot dog sales. That's not the case this year, but I think we're trying to adapt to what experiences we still can provide our fans in this new environment.
So so thank you for sharing that. It's a great story, but let's just recount like the latency in that fan experience. So like the fan shows up to collect their cardboard cutout, they scan their ticket, that gets logged in the MLB data set, right? And you've shared that through an authorized view with the club. Then the club gets that notification and then delivers the thing. Like this is all happening while the fan is like standing at the back door waiting to collect their thing.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a few core technologies that make this all so seamless. We use PubSub from GCP to ingest messages as they occur, so that's where our ticket scans are coming in. GCP provides a tool for data flow, a data flow template that streams the data into BigQuery. So far, all of this, the great thing about this is there are 0 lines of code that my team has written to maintain any of this. It's all Google managed services, which is great, again, from the ability to go to sleep at night sort of thing. And echoing what Ed was talking about, I can recall a time just a few years ago when during key events, all of us would be on all night watching our JMS server crash and worrying about what data loss we had and how we were going to recover from it. So, I can't understate, having experience in this field, how much it's a benefit to have managed services at scale that handle this sort of thing for you. So yes, on the ingestion side, all of that is handled for us. And then once BigQuery has the data, again, with authorized views, what we love about this is that we're not making a copy of the data. So our previous implementation of how we shared data with clubs was exactly that. It was we would spit out files that would get sent to cloud storage buckets for clubs to consume. And that was essentially how clubs got the data. And at best, it could be latent by a minute or 5 minutes or hourly. But with this setup, it basically is a infinitely scalable data warehouse where you could have any number of users accessing that same data. And I think with BigQuery, there's great examples of the public data sets, including COVID public data sets, that anybody can query from anywhere in the world in real time. And there's no limits to how well that can be shared.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. We'll use COVID as a segue to Ed in just a second, but I wanted to talk with you about sharing a data set like with the whole world. BigQuery and Google Cloud have really like very serious security measures as well. So yes, public data sets, you can make a data set public and share it with anybody. You can also lock that baby down and share it with just one person through the identity access and management systems. So like if you're watching here, like sharing does not necessarily mean the whole world. You can control who gets it. And so like we can do that in a very secure way, which I know MLB is doing. So Ed, like, let's switch over to you for a second here. So building on that like COVID theme, I check the New York Times app every day to see the COVID stats. Like y'all have generated one of the most reliable and trusted data sources, as well as publication, like distribution channels for COVID data. That wasn't on your list last January.
Yeah, well, definitely wasn't on my team's list and still is not on my team's list. But, one of the important things that, to mention here is that the New York Times is not a data company. That's not our job, right? Our job is to get the newspaper out every single morning, or to get the news in front of you in the apps. And surely, yes, the newsroom did not expect to have to build out this giant COVID database to enrich the news that they need to share with everybody on a day-to-day basis. That said, the newsroom needs to move quickly. And, it was really exciting to talk with the engineers that worked on those data sets to hear about how fast they were able to move on what they called the world's smallest Kubernetes cluster, adding hundreds of different web scrapers to try to pull all this different public data together, and then publishing that all out on Google Cloud Storage as a very public way for our front ends to interact with that data and make that instantly available for everybody in a very, very fast environment.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit then also about the newsroom. The newsroom as a not news person, I think about people who are reporters and go back 30 or 40 years, and you've got the people with the hat, the little paper stuck in the that's your image of this Hollywood newsroom. So, but is the newsroom of today filled with data engineers and highly skilled analysts?
Well, yes and no. So we do have a fantastic team within the newsroom called the Interactive News Team, and they are the team that works closely with graphics to be able to curate all this information and generate those pretty graphs that everybody talks about. That's the fun part of when I have to describe my job, is everyone's like, "Oh, you work on the graphic stuff," and it's like, "No, I do the fun data engineering stuff about users." But that said, we do have good trained engineers in the newsroom, but they work at a very different pace than what the rest of our organization works on. They have to think about what is the fastest, most efficient way for them to be able to put together what they need to do on a day-to-day basis. Whereas we can focus a little bit more on longer term strategy. So that's why they joke with me about, this world's smallest Kubernetes cluster, because they just throw app on app on app inside that system, and plug away to get whatever they can get running and make sure that will stay consistent and keep running in order to collect all that information and put it into a database.
When we were prepping for this, one of the things that I was really one of the themes that started to come out in my mind as we were talking about this was democratization of data. Rob was talking a little bit about sharing data with clubs. And democratization, it's a bit of a buzzword here, but it actually has some real weight, particularly in this context, right? Nick, New York Times is democratizing this data for me as a consumer of it, on my phone. So, that's making it accessible. And, and the Google tooling is allowing, you and your team and the newsroom team to be iterating so fast, to make those things possible.
Yeah. I don't know what to add to that.
Anyway, it's just I'm pleased that virtuous cycle is working in this particular avenue, because it's valuable to the whole world.
Yeah, I think it does speak to how incredibly flexible GCP has been for us, that each team that works with that, and we have many, many, many different teams that work within GCP. We've all been able to pick apart the really cool services that are provided and use what we need to use and tailor it toward how our teams work.
Gotcha. Let's change topics a little bit here, and we'll kind of when you're kind of coming to the end of the session here. Can you gentlemen talk a little bit about what was it about Google Cloud and the data and analytics stack that made you be like, okay, yeah, we should use that. These are the benefits that we're going to get for it. This is why we want to pick this one up. And if there are any elements about particular feedback on the tenants that we have, we want it to be open, flexible, intelligent, with ML baked in, secure, so that you can do that sharing, Rob, and make sure the data only goes where you want it to. If you've got any thoughts around those, it'd be really interesting to hear. Rob, why don't we start with you, please?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think for us, the most important part of what is keeping us and making us very happy on Google Cloud platform is feeling like we're a partner as a part of this. I give a little bit of a shout out here back to you, Chad, who runs these data analytics customer council meetings that I've been taking part in the past few months, along with Ed and many other constituent companies that are taking part in those. And what's really great about that is it's clearly a conversation. It's not a bunch of slides being presented by Google of here's what our product direction is. That is part of it, but it also is just as much feedback about, of these 5 features, if we built this one next, how many of you, show of hands, would use it? So you feel like you're really a part of the development on this. And again, it's just one of those things that's very different than previous platforms I've been on. When we look to do an upgrade, it was something you did every couple years, and you dreaded it because what was going to break, how much downtime was there going to be? And if we were lucky, hopefully everything would keep running at the end of the day. Sometimes you would wait until your platform was literally end of life, and then you had to migrate to the next version. With GCP, I mean, honestly, I check the release notes once every few weeks, and it feels like it's my birthday when I open it up and there's a bunch of new things for me that are now presents for me available in Google on my platform today. Like, oh, wait, I always wanted a function that did that, and now it's just there. And so I don't have to do anything at all on my side to be able to take advantage of those things. And I always just share these emails with my team being like, hey, anybody have any ideas of where we could use these things? And usually the team, one of my team members or one of our analysts is like, I was actually trying to figure out a way to do just that. And now this is so much easier. So we just see that constant investment that Google has in this platform and the growth of it. And again, all you have to do is look at those release notes, and they're all significant improvements and changes to performance and capabilities that have happened just over the year and a half that we've been on the platform.
It's great to hear. I mean, we actually do work very, very hard to engage customers, like large, small, and in between, so that customers have both a very precise voice inside our product plans and a loud one. We want to make sure that the stuff we make serves you. So I'm glad we're doing all right there, and we'll always strive to do better. Ed, how do you what was your story on this in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, what ultimately brought us onto BigQuery was just how insanely fast and performant it had always been. And, I say this was something, we noticed immediately when we came onto Google a few years ago. It's something that analysts still talk about how the ease and speed of being able to do their work. But the reality of it is that Google just does not treat us like a number, like an account number. We actively, as Rob had pointed out, and get engaged in these data analytics conferences. Historically, the BigQuery team has also done annual conferences with the customers to better understand needs, pitch product ideas, that sort of thing. And we also have account managers who are actively engaging with us and really making sure that we are making the best out of what Google can provide for us. But what's been really cool is how we've been able to think and see BigQuery's roadmap ahead of time, or the data analytics roadmap ahead of time, because that's enabled us at the New York Times to be able to plan a lot better around what is going to be available. And a really good example of that is how, recently we got a great update about the BI engine roadmap and it being much more openly available as opposed to only currently where it's available in Data Studio. Now we can actually use that around our roadmap and understand, okay, cool, how can we better take advantage of BI engine, like writing an API that directly hits BigQuery queries and managing, that way analysts can better manage their domains around dimensions and metrics, and not have to focus on having to build out like caching mechanisms and that sort of thing on our own. So getting that kind of clarity has been really helpful, and it really helps us iron out what we should be building.
Great. I mean, so if Google's going to build it, you don't have to allocate headcount. And conversely, if it's not in our roadmap, then that's the place to focus. And we want to hear about that because we'll put that in for the next rev. Well, gentlemen, I just wanted to start to wrap up here. I'll invite you to make any final comments in just a moment. But as we prepared for this, it was really interesting to see how your stories, even though they came from such different, end user bases or end user use bases, and you're doing fundamentally different things in the marketplace, different industries, but a lot of the data problems end up being the same. And anyway, so I just wanted to thank you both. I really enjoyed prepping this and delivering this session with you. And I'm very much looking forward to continuing in the customer councils. I want to throw props out to the account teams that also link us, right? They do an awful lot of work to make sure that we stay in sync and keep treating you as not a number. I really love that. So anyway, let me offer it. So Rob, starting with you, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to relay?
I think more than anything else, I think it's just our overall satisfaction with BigQuery is just, still so high. I can't really, it was funny. We were trying to talk about planning for this, hey, are there drawbacks that we want to consider and discuss? And I had to really pull my team to be like, hey, is there any problems that we have with this system? What's wrong with it? I can't really think of, honestly, and that's very surprising and not that common at all. I mean, in tech, there's always trade-offs. Whenever you accept one tool or technology, you're always looking at there's always some trade-off. This is the good thing, but this is the bad thing. And I just feel, without sounding like too much of a shill, that there just really hasn't been that side of this with us so far. Like everything, the migration and everything on the platform since, there hasn't been this giant gotcha, this giant thing that really threw us off from our plans. And so it just feels like we're riding on, a train that's continually moving forward fast. And we're excited to see where it goes next.
We're going to keep, like COVID was the huge gotcha of this year. And so we'll keep hustling together to keep you on the leading edge of that. Ed, anything you wanted to wrap up with?
Yeah, well, I mean, sure, COVID caught us all, but we don't have any issues with BigQuery at all. And, kind of similar to what Rob said, what's really great is when we're having these conversations internally about, different tools that we want to develop, very rarely is it ever the case that we're saying, oh, we need to build around something that Google did because of X or Y issue. And, what's been really cool about that is just like, even when we do see issues, how responsive that Google is to, check in with us, figure out what the problem is, help fix it for us, roll back issues, whatever it is. And that's just shows, how incredibly happy we are with the tools.
Well, it's wonderful to hear. We'll continue to press ahead. There'll be no resting on laurels here. So, and with that, for the webinar here, we'll go ahead and wrap up at this point. Thank you very much for spending the time. I hope the information and the stories were both useful and interesting for you. And we'll catch you another time. Farewell, everyone.